Okay, we are ready.
So I am calling this meeting to order tonight, October 21st, for our general plan, the LUCE update. This is a combined meeting, the Buellton City Council and the Buellton Planning Commission. Claire, if I can get you to do roll call for me.
Oh, no pledge of allegiance?
Oh, I have roll call and then the pledge on my agenda item. Shall we do the pledge first? Would you prefer?
Yes.
Okay. Chair Hamill, if you could please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. Thank you very much. Claire, if I can get you to do a roll call for us.
Councilmember Andresic, not here. Councilmember King?
Here.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Here.
Vice Mayor Mercado?
Here.
Mayor Holly Sierra?
Here.
Planning Commission, Commissioner Bob Blockdyke is absent. Commissioner Heedy is absent. Commissioner Liggett?
Here.
Vice Chair Sarkia is absent. Chair Hamill?
Here.
All righty. Thank you very much. Irma, did you want to give us a lowdown on the program format, meeting protocols, how we're going to handle comments?
Yes, I will go through that. So, thank you, Mayor Sierra, as you've indicated, this is a joint meeting. It's a joint study session between the City Council and the Planning Commission to go through the land use and circulation element update that's in the process of being prepared. And we've shortened land use and circulation element to LUCE, L-U-C-E, in case you hear us talk like that. It's not a new word, it's just an acronym. So this is being broadcast, live streamed on the city TV. It's being recorded as well, and the video of the meeting will be available probably, I think it takes a few days to get it processed, so it'll be up on the website as well as on the city's YouTube channel next week, barring any unforeseen circumstances. So there are no public participants at the meeting per se. This is just the folks that are on the screen at this point will be participating in the discussion tonight. If there are any public comments that have come in, I believe we've received one so far. Claire, I don't know if we've received any more since that one came in.
Just that one so far.
That one. So that one comment at the end of the presentations on the land use and circulation and all the discussion at the end, Mayor Sierra will read that one comment into the record before we wrap up. So the format for tonight is we were basically have broken up the topics into two: the land use and then the circulation. And in between those two portions, there will be a 5-minute break. So in each of the formats, we have a presentation by staff, and then short policy focus direction, but mainly we are asking at that point for the City Council and the Planning Commission to give us comments. We were estimating that if we had a full house, we would have approximately 3 minutes each member for comments during the land use portion, and then 5 minutes for each member on the circulation portion. But since we don't have a full house between the Planning Commission and the City Council, we could probably go 5 minutes on each, just see, how we're going. So we just wanted to make sure that we weren't really running over. The program I sent out this afternoon has some estimated times on it. It's meant just to kind of keep us on track so that we don't run really late. Hopefully try and get out of here sooner than what is in the is on the schedule. After all the presentations and public comments, we'll just do a quick wrap up. That I'll just recap what we've done so far, do some reminders, and then turn it over to the Planning Commission Chair Hamill for some closing comments, and then back to the mayor for closing comments and adjournment. So that's kind of how we're going to do this tonight. And I would just like to take a moment and introduce the team that is working on the general plan LUCE update. We have present tonight is our city manager, Scott Wolf, planning director, Andrea Kiefer. We have Rose behind the scenes running all the equipment. And then we have the rest of the planning staff, which is Kara Barcelona, Kara Michi, and myself. And we have with us Joel Falter with KOA Transportation Consultants. He will be doing a portion of the presentation under the circulation element. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Andrea to just give us a little bit of an introduction on the what we're doing, the whole general plan update effort. So, Andrea?
Mute. You're on mute.
Mute. And then,
Claire, could you go ahead and share your screen with the presentation?
Uh-oh.
okay.
Let's try it again. Technical difficulties. We'll get it. Why won't this one do it?
Remember, you can drag this, or actually just hit the little thing. And just go back. There you go. Oh, she's already on like a few slides forward. Next one, I think. There you go. Why don't I hear
Andrea?
Yes.
Okay, do you see it? Are you guys able to see the presentation on the screen?
No.
No?
That's weird. We see it.
Let me stop sharing.
I can see it on City TV.
Yes.
Why won't it let me stop sharing now?
I wonder if it's not swapped into the wrong, you've got two monitors there, right?
Right.
I wonder if you should move it into the other monitor.
Okay.
Well, that may only take care of it on,
Yeah. It popped up really quickly.
Can you see
Yeah.
it?
it just,
First two times I tried.
Okay, let's try it again.
And you had it up before it was working, so.
okay.
Now it's gone.
Oh, because it's closed. The file's not open. So you want to open the file. Whoops.
There we go, maybe.
Where's the file?
Almost, not quite.
Hold on 1 sec. Minimize or move this screen over. And hold it from the top bar. Scoot it. Put it over here for now. And then, no, don't edit that. Just move that also. And it's somewhere there. There, workshop number 2. And then I'll put everything else back over here. And then I'll show.
Jeez, what happened?
No. Just take this one. Take this, move that back. No, I'll go back to that. Okay, now go back to the Zoom. So it's on there. Okay, go back to share screen. Now you can see that. Okay.
There we go.
All right.
Okay, do you guys see that? Do you see the
Yeah.
presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, yeah, that's right. That's good.
Perfect.
All right. Okay. Well, so I'll just jump into the presentation here. So we just wanted to start out the presentation by giving out a little bit of a background information about the project and what we're doing, where we've been, just to provide a little bit of context. And then I will talk a little bit about, just briefly, about the first workshop and what was done there, and then the goals for this workshop tonight. So what are we doing? We are updating the land use and circulation elements of the Buellton General Plan. So the land use element will consist of a more focused update, which will be mainly cleanup, and the circulation element will be a more comprehensive update. So as part of the update, we will be incorporating various statutory requirements, so things like social equity and various state laws, state mandates related to housing and transportation. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just really briefly, what is a general plan? So the Buellton General Plan is a blueprint for the community's vision of future growth. It is a policy document that is required by state law, which with the goal of providing long-range guidance for the city related to different topic areas, which include land use and circulation, among other elements. Next slide, please. So why are we going through this update process? So the last update to the land use and circulation elements occurred in 2007. So the goal of this update is to reflect the changes that have happened since that time. Also, we're looking, in terms of for land use, we're looking to identify best future land uses for vacant and underutilized properties, as well as establish relevant long-term improvements to our citywide circulation system, including Highway 246, so related to circulation there. Also, we're looking to consider gaps in policy, programs, and statutory requirements within the existing land use and circulation elements. We're also, and this one is an important one, looking to confirm and clarify the vision for the future of Buellton as it relates to land use and circulation. And also looking to inform a more comprehensive future update of the land use element and other general plan elements, which is slated to occur sometime around 2025. Next slide, please. So the project consists of 4 phases, or will be completed in what we've put together in as 4 phases. We are here, as you see in the arrow here, the first phase. So the first phase, we're looking at existing conditions, identifying issues and opportunities as related to the land use and circulation elements, and establishing desired outcomes. So as part of this, we are looking to come up with an overall vision for the community as it relates to land use and circulation. So the second phase here would be to put together a draft report that will then be reviewed by the community, the Planning Commission, and the City Council. So we're anticipating moving into the second phase soon. We're just sort of coming to the end of phase 1 here with this workshop we have tonight. The next step would be, so the third phase rather, would be to move into preparing the environmental impact report and making the necessary refinements to the land use and circulation elements. And that is expected to occur early to mid next year, early to mid 2021. And finally, the fourth phase would be that we anticipate bringing the program environmental impact report and the land use and circulation, updated land use and circulation elements to the Planning Commission and City Council for adoption, which is slated to occur mid to late next year. Next slide. So just to go over the public workshop. So far we've had the first workshop, which was held back in August, and this was a community workshop with the purpose of informing the public on the existing conditions and opportunities in Buellton as they relate to the land use and circulation element, and also to listen to the community regarding their needs, the issues that they see in Buellton, and their desired outcomes. So workshop number 2, so that's where we are tonight here, which is the joint study session with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So what are the goals for tonight? First, we would like to inform the City Council and Planning Commission about the land use and circulation element update process that we are currently going through. And secondly, we are looking to obtain input from the City Council and Planning Commission tonight to help guide the analysis for and the preparation of the draft land use and circulation element updates. So I'll now turn it over to Kara Michi to go over a broad overview of the community survey that was conducted.
Okay, so Andrea mentioned the community survey. It was around the time of the first community workshop in late August that we put together this survey to gather input on desired land uses in the city, the Williamson property, and what people wanted to see there, and circulation issues, both citywide and specifically on Highway 246. So the outreach ran from early August, starting with 3 questions that we put out in the Buellton Buzz, asking what types of land uses do we need more of in Buellton, what readers wanted to see at the Williamson property, and then what issues affected them most in regards to transportation and circulation in Buellton. We only received about 7 responses emailed back to us, but we still felt it was important to give people the paper option that would be mailed out in the Buzz. So then we rolled out an online SurveyMonkey survey with 8 questions. So the 3 questions in the Buzz were included with this, and then 5 additional questions. And this received 186 responses. The survey was noticed multiple times on our city Facebook page and our planning department and city home web pages, with the graphic that you see below in some of those posts, and then put at the top of the web pages. So to give you an idea of who took the survey, the first online question we asked was what survey takers' connection was to Buellton. And 73% of survey takers lived in Buellton, 43% owned residential property, 27% worked in Buellton, and 5% owned a commercial or industrial property or business. 17% responded other, and that included those who lived in surrounding areas or visited Buellton or were botanic garden volunteers. So the questions after in the online survey were a combination of multiple choice, yes or no, and open-ended responses. And the open-ended responses were all analyzed by grouping the comments into themes. So you can see one of the word clouds below. That is the result of analyzing those open-ended comments. The statistics were gathered from these themes, and the word cloud below, you'll see the more it was mentioned, the bigger the word appears. So the full summary of the survey will be made available in a public report. Tonight, though, throughout the land use and circulation presentations by staff, we'll be incorporating some of these results specifically as they apply. So look forward to what almost 200 members of our community shared on their thoughts, concerns, and vision for land use and circulation in Buellton.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kara. And we'll be hearing a little bit more from Kara on some of the survey responses, and they'll be incorporated into also the circulation section. So you'll hear a little bit more about what came back from the community. I'm just going to give a brief overview on what we're doing with the land use element. As Andrea mentioned, this is a focused update. The land use element was last updated. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Land use element was last updated in 2007, and the framework for that planning horizon was 2025 for the entire general plan that we have right now. So we will, in the next few years, be doing a more comprehensive update. But right now we are doing a focused update, cleanup of the land use elements. The goals will essentially remain the same, and I will, on the next slide, don't move it yet, but I will go through the goals of the land use element. So again, as Andrea mentioned, the technical update, we want to make sure that we're consistent with the circulation element that's being updated. We will reflect any land use changes that took place since 2007. And then in addition to incorporating the statutory requirements and updating policies and programs as needed, we'll also take into consideration any special land use issues, including historic resources. Okay, next slide, please. I would just quickly like to go through the existing goal in the land use element, which will remain essentially the same. And those goals would be to manage the growth of the city so that adequate facilities and services can be provided in pace with development, to expand shopping and services that better provide for the needs of the residents, to revitalize the Avenue of Flags and the Highway 246 core as an identifiable downtown, and to focus growth inward to accommodate population increases and housing needs. Next slide, please. At this point, I'd like to go through just briefly our land use designations, which we're all pretty familiar with, but it's kind of interesting to revisit how these are spread apart in the city. So the city consists of approximately 1,025 acres. There's 10 land use designations that are described in the existing land use element. There's residential land uses. 40% of the land in the city is designated for residential uses. And of the residential, low density is the predominant land use, followed by medium density and multifamily. Commercial uses make up just over 30% of the land. Industrial is 12%. And open space makes up about 12% of the land. Remaining 4% is for public, quasi-public, and school designations. Okay, next slide, thank you. So this just shows the layout in visual terms of the land use element, which is in the general plan currently. So next slide. What has happened since 2007? Well, the Redevelopment Agency, also referred to as the RDA, it ceased operating. All the plans that were covered under the redevelopment project areas and the related funding, it was all dismantled. So this will need to be removed from the land use element as part of this update. And we have the Oak Springs, originally known as Oak Springs, but now known as the Village Specific Plan, that was originally adopted in 2007 and amended in 2013. While the specific plan was in place in 2007, the actual land uses and the specific land uses for the various parcels were not all in place. And as these are developing out, some of them have changed slightly. So those changes will be incorporated into the land use element. The other major specific plan is for the Avenue of Flags, which was adopted in 2017. That needs to be incorporated into the document. And we also have the affordable housing overlay zone sites. 4 of those sites have been developed, and we'll need to adjust the land use designations, the underlying land use designations on that, which were not always residential. Some of them were commercial. And then, as Kara may have mentioned, that the Williamson property was also acquired by the city. It was recently. So this is the future opportunity that the city is in the process of addressing right now, but we need to fold that in as plans evolve for that in the coming months. We need to fold that in the land use element update. All right, next slide, please. All right, I'll just quickly mention here on the village-specific plan, the specific uses that came into play that need to be reflected in the land use element were specifically for the commercial uses, which are the retail and office uses, the hotel uses, and the residential, single-family and multifamily, and the senior housing projects, and then the parks and open space. Next slide, please. And the Avenue of Flags, which was the most recently adopted, really speaks to one of the goals that is existing in the land use element, and that is to turn the downtown core into a vibrant, active space. And the Avenue of Flags was adopted with the goal of doing that. The policies in that plan encourage activating the medians, creating destination places, enhancing pedestrian safety via crosswalks, pathways, traffic calming, and strategic building massing, park-like improvements. So these elements all need to be incorporated into the land use element. Next slide. The AHAS sites, there were 9 sites identified in the land use element, and 4 of these have been developed. The 2 residential, 2 of the sites were originally designated for residential and were developed residentially for Juliet Walk and the Avenue Heights. And I'm sorry, I have that wrong. Sorry. The 4 sites that were developed, 2 of them were actually developed for residential projects. And that, as I mentioned, is Juliet Walk and Avenue Heights. But 2 of the AHAS sites were developed for non-residential projects. That would be the Hampton Inn, and construction is pending on the Waypoint Bowling Alley. So that leaves 5 of the sites that could still potentially be developed for the AHAS. And next slide, please. This is just a visual that shows where the AHAS sites that were built out and where the others are throughout the city. And we can just move on to the next slide. So we will be taking the existing land uses that are shown in the current land use element, updating them with all the items that I mentioned in the previous slides, and creating an updated existing conditions scenario, which will be the baseline scenario to use as part of this land use element update. We will also be looking at 2 additional scenarios for the alternatives for the environmental analysis and also for planning purposes. And we will get into this a little bit more in detail and later in the presentation. But I just wanted to mention these scenarios so that when you hear us talking about scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, you'll know what we're referring to. So scenario 2, we will be looking at a 10-year build out. We will be looking at the desired uses that we would like to see during that period, any assumptions we're making on the densities that will be built out, and opportunities that exist for building out during that period of time. And scenario 3 is actually what we're calling a circulation and land planning hybrid. It's an idea, it's partially a vision, and it's partially a strategy for addressing some of the issues that we all are very familiar with in the city, stemming a lot from the traffic and circulation. So we will be discussing that during the circulation element presentation. Okay, so with that, I'd like to turn it back to Kara, because she's going to talk a little bit more about what came back from the community survey related to land use specific
Okay, thank you, Irma. So the two visuals that you see on the screen represent the two land use questions in the community survey. The first on the left, the bar graph, shows the question that we ask: what types of land uses do we need more of in Buellton? And survey takers could check all of any of the multiple choice questions that they wanted to check. They could check all of them if they wanted to, but the top three choices that survey takers picked were recreational facilities, community spaces, and open space and parks, meaning that half of all the survey takers picked these three choices. So when it came to what respondents wanted to see at the Williamson property, that's shown on the right side with the word cloud. And it has some pretty neat correlations with the question before. So the top two themes, when we analyzed the open-ended comments on that question, were recreation and community. So respondents wanted to see those were the top two themes in the answers. And then also a lot of residents spoke about the Williamson property being an extension of Riverview Park. So then, for example, 65% checked recreation as a land use we needed more of in the city, and 62% mentioned recreation or some sort of recreational facility that is something that they wanted to see at the Williamson property. And community was the second largest theme. And while it has overlap with recreation, it also includes educational components, which was the fourth most checked desired land use in the city. So a quarter of respondents checked that they wanted to see more educational facilities. So this carried over to the Williamson property desired uses. For example, a quarter of respondents checked they wanted to see a children's museum. Another quarter mentioned community classes, meeting and study space, moving a library, and arts and culture museum. And then other responses that we received were events were mentioned by about 14% of the respondents. But then in correlation with that, 10% of respondents also recognized that they didn't want undesirable impacts in relation to events to the neighborhood, especially in regards to traffic, parking, and noise. So potential uses for the Williamson property based on this community input and based on City Council and Planning Commission input and feasibility will all be included in the focused land use element update, and the impacts to circulation will be analyzed with that. However, these survey responses have also lent to some bigger citywide issues or insights for circulation, the issue of access. So access meaning that homes are close by recreational and community spaces and that residents have the ability to easily and safely get to them, whether by foot, bike, car, or otherwise. If this ability is seen as hindered, as later survey responses might show, this could lend to part of the reason why residents want more of these uses in the city, because access is hindered to existing community and recreational and park spaces. You can go to the next slide. Okay. So the second scenario assumes that all vacant sites and lots with the potential for ADUs and the Williamson property at 202 Dairyland Road will all be built out within 10 years. And the scenario takes into account the development assumptions in the Village Specific Plan and the Avenue of Flag Specific Plan with the additional density potential for the Development Opportunity Reserve or DOR program. It includes the Affordable Housing Overlay or AHOZ zone, which requires 25 units minimum per acre, and also the city's inclusionary zoning requirement. And these, the AHOZ and inclusionary requirement, both play into potential additional density with the state density bonus law. So all of these considerations we felt were necessary in getting an accurate picture of the maximum development potential that could take place in order to plan adequately for circulation. So these next 3 slides, you'll see the vast majority of our vacant parcels are zoned general commercial, service commercial, or industrial. And then there's the Williamson property as well. So there's approximately 114 acres of vacant land in the city. And on this slide, we see all the general commercial parcels, which make up 43% of that, the vacant parcels. They're shown in pink here. This zoning designation allows for commercial retail, wholesale, and office uses, as well as secondary residential and industrial mixed use. Most of these lots are AHOZ, as you see them labeled, meaning they could be developed entirely as residential. So you can go to the next slide. The few vacant parcels that you see here zoned service commercial are in the darker pink, and this is about 11 acres. These could facilitate heavier commercial and light industrial uses, like furniture stores, car sales, ranch supply stores, and then again, residential and industrial mixed use developments. And the next slide. Okay, and then lastly, there are about 25 acres of vacant land zoned for industrial and manufacturing. And these are all between the Williamson property and Rancho de Maria. And our mixed use ordinance also allows commercial and residential on these parcels to be mixed use secondary uses. So from left to right, the large parcel to the south of the wastewater treatment plant is one of these. And the parcel approved for the station or the network project. And then next to that is the parcel approved for the Summerlin Wine Annex, or formerly Terravant Annex. And then that large parcel was approved for the Buellton Hub project, but it may be important to note that the station and the hub properties have been put on hold by the applicant and are listed for sale. So at this point, I will turn it over to Andrea to start us off for a policy discussion for the land use portion.
Great, thank you, Kara. So again, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, the land use element will be a more focused update and will primarily consist of a technical update. A comprehensive update will occur in a few years when the city will undertake a comprehensive general plan update of all the general plan elements. So as far as updating, the focused update of the land use element and updating the policies and programs, we will be removing some policies that are no longer applicable. So just to give some examples of that, as Irma mentioned earlier on in the presentation, the redevelopment agency has ceased operating since the last update. And so all of the references within the existing land use element to the redevelopment agency will be removed. There are also some policies and programs in there that have been accomplished, so some achievements in terms of implementation of the land use element, and so those will be, some of those may be removed from the existing land use element. We will be modifying or updating existing policies and programs as appropriate. So as Irma touched on earlier in the presentation, we will be replacing references to, for instance, the Avenue of Flags Urban Design Plan with the Avenue of Flags Specific Plan, as that's the more current and relevant document to be working off of. And again, we will be updating and modifying some of the existing policies and programs to be consistent with current state housing law, and also to correlate with the updated circulation element that we are working on at the same time. There may also be some other minor text edits to the land use element as we go through and make the changes. There is a possibility also that we will be adding new goals, policies, and/or programs, and that would be as a result of trying to provide some consistency with the preferred scenario that results as part of this update. And it may also require us to add some new goals, policies, and/or programs within the land use element to incorporate social equity considerations. So next slide, please. So social equity, I just wanted to cover sort of what that is and give some context to that because it's something that recent state legislation has emphasized the role of social equity and environmental justice in urban planning. So just to give a definition of what that is here, environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Next slide, please. So just to further define, environmental justice addresses inequities amongst a city's population, describing environmental, social, and economic burdens that may disproportionately affect certain populations more than others. And some of the metrics that are used to, or one of the main metrics that are used to quantify this or to analyze this is this concept of disadvantaged communities. So disadvantaged communities are areas affected most by economic and environmental burdens, health and environmental burdens. So some of these burdens include poverty, high unemployment, increased risk of asthma and heart disease, and often limited access to safe and clean drinking water. So next slide, please. But I will note that according to state guidelines, the city of Buellton currently has no formally identified disadvantaged communities. However, the land use and circulation element update process will review if there are locally appropriate conditions or variables that need to be identified and addressed from a social equity standpoint. Next slide, please. So just to kind of further that point, the land use and circulation element update process will review potential issues and available data to determine if there are disproportionate environmental, social, and economic burdens which need to be addressed in the community. And just to give an example or some ideas of what some of those variables might be or topic areas might be, this diagram here has been included, but it could include anything from impacts related to hazardous waste or traffic, things like that, or population characteristics such as linguistic isolation, poverty, things that might impact children and elderly specifically, unemployment, and others. So next slide. So that concludes the land use staff presentation portion of the study session. We're now moving into the portion of the study session where we're going to ask that for comments from the Planning Commission and City Council, specifically pertaining to the land use portion of the presentation. So we will start with the Planning Commission, and once the Planning Commission has concluded their remarks, the City Council will then be given the opportunity to provide their comments on the land use portion of the presentation. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Planning Commission Chair Hamill to facilitate comments on the land use portion of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Can we ask questions now, if we keep it under 3 minutes?
Oh, yeah, you're going to have to in order.
Chair Hamill, you take your time. Questions, comments, whatever you and your commissioners would like to put out there is just fine.
Okay, I have one question before I turn it over for comments, and if it doesn't pertain to this, someone can address it with me later. I'm a little bit confused. I thought I understood what AHAWS was, Affordable Housing Overlay Zone. How did that get incorporated into two commercial properties, the Hampton Inn and the Waypoint Bowling Alley? How does that work?
So the AHAWS sites, so the underlying zoning of the AHAWS sites is, for the most part, I believe, general commercial. So, okay. So the idea with the AHAWS sites is that those sites can be developed with 100% residential projects even though they are zoned general commercial, because they have this overlay. And so in those cases, so the Hampton Inn and then the Waypoint project, the property owner or the project applicant chose to utilize the underlying zoning of general commercial to develop their property. However, there is the option with these sites to develop 100% residential projects as an alternative, but there are specific requirements if somebody is going to develop one of the AHAS sites as residential. They have to meet certain parameters within the code. So from a density perspective, affordability perspective, et cetera.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I believe, is it still just Commissioner Liggett and I representing Planning Commission tonight?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Liggett, I'll turn the table over to you. Do you have any questions, comments so far?
Yes, thank you. I had that same question about the AHAS in regards to how it's used. Is this something that kind of statewide or countywide was implemented or required to implement, or is this something that us as a city, as planners, decided to implement to achieve a goal that was set forth?
So the AHAS sites were something that were incorporated into the last land use element. That it's well, the the state law is sort of going in that direction, but in a lot of ways, the city is sort of ahead of the curve there with these AHAS sites. So it was something that was incorporated in the last land use element update.
Okay. So I do see how that meets I'm looking back at the 4 goals of manage growth and to focus growth inwards. And I think the AHAS does help achieve that. Are there any other strategies to focus growth inwards or manage growth that's not necessarily focused around affordable housing? I think there is a density bonus, if I'm correct, as a way to make more dense housing in specific areas.
Yes, there is a state law or state density bonus law, and within our existing municipal code, we also do have a density bonus provisions in there.
Okay.
I don't know, just really quickly, Scott, I thought I heard you maybe were trying to chime in there, or?
Just as a little more background for Commissioner Liggett, and I'm not fully up to speed on the whole history of it, but the AHAS zones, as I understand it, were initially a requirement that the city adopt and identify properties with potential for the development of affordable housing. And that requirement came out of a settlement or a court decision that was brought against the city, alleging that the city had inappropriately removed affordable housing. And so in an effort to remedy the perceived wrong there, the city has identified these AHAS sites as potential sites for affordable housing, not necessarily requiring that they be developed that way, but identifying them in such a way that any developer who were to come in and be interested in affordable housing would be able to identify these sites up front and know that they would get, I hesitate to say preferential treatment, but their requests would be treated in a preferential manner to remove obstacles for the development of that type of housing.
Okay. So if 0 of the remaining sites are dedicated to the affordable housing, that's okay? There's nothing inappropriate or any about that? They're not mandatory to be used for affordable housing is how I understand it.
To my understanding, no, it's not mandatory. The underlying zoning remains. However, despite the underlying zoning on some of these being commercial, they were identified as potential affordable housing sites, again, to make up for that perceived wrong that was done at some point in the city's history.
All right, well, great, thank you. To wrap up, I think that's great what you presented. The fact that you are encouraging or allowing mixed use in commercial and industrial zones, I think is great. That helps accomplish the goal of focusing growth inwards and managing the population growth. So I think I agree with everything that you've presented to me, and it looks good. Thank you.
Thank you. That's what my comment is too. I wanted to thank the planning department for putting together all of this information, working on all these updates, doing the survey, and then the survey, what shakes out from all of that. I don't really think there's too many surprises there. But yeah, everything looks good. I'm not sure what I can throw in there otherwise. So I guess that concludes our Planning Commission comments, and I'll turn it back over to City Council.
Thank you very much, Chair Hamill. Let's see, we've got, I don't know if Councilman Sanchez is still with us.
Yeah, this is John. Can you hear me?
Hey, John, where are you now?
I'm on the 405. So, and I just wanted to thank you. It looks pretty comprehensive, and I enjoyed the presentation. I can see it, but I'm not on the video because I'm traveling. But thank you very much. No special comments right now. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. It's nice you're still with us. Thanks for the effort. Councilman King, any questions or comments?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was charging my phone. No, this we've had a pretty good presentation so far. So yeah, so far so good. I don't really have any questions. It's been pretty comprehensive.
It is. It is. Thank you. Vice Mayor Mercado, questions, comments?
No questions, but thanks staff and the planning department for putting on a great show here for us, and it's very comprehensive and interesting to see what comments that we had from the rest of the residents here. So I look forward to implementing some of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am truly impressed that you had 186 responses on your Survey Monkey. That's wonderful. I did have a couple of questions. First of all, this is pretty much just cleanup. You're saying we're doing a comprehensive update for 2025. So is this just getting everything cleaned up and ready for 2025, or is this just going to fit right into the 2025?
It will set the stage for the 2025, because at that point we have several other elements that need to be updated. So a more comprehensive visioning process would take place at that point. So we're really not changing any land uses at this stage. We're just, as we mentioned, updating what has happened since 2007. But in the 2025 update, I would imagine that there would be a visioning process going on that would incorporate the other elements as well as the land use element for a more comprehensive effort. Yeah.
Thank you. Because, our urban growth boundary expires in 2025, and I just, what we're looking at for this land use is within the city limits of Buellton at this point, correct? We're not looking outside. We're looking at what we have right now.
That is correct. Correct. And so the 2025 comprehensive update, the city at that point would need to address the urban growth boundary.
Terrific. Okay, just a couple more. The disadvantaged, I know that Buellton is considered state, according to the state regulations, that Buellton doesn't have a disadvantaged public, the residents. But are we going to perhaps with this give any special consideration to say the residents that live in the hotels on Avenue of Flags? I mean, I know we've done a study. Is that going to come back and be a part of this land use?
So the social equity requirement, as Andre had mentioned, environmental justice, social equity, as state requires us to fold that in either as a standalone element or fold it into our existing elements as we are updating them. So yes, we will be taking a look to see if there are any appropriate conditions, any conditions locally that would be appropriate to identify as, like micro areas that are socially disadvantaged or that fit this. And the residents on the avenue in the hotels, that may be one area that we look at. I know at the planning commission, not the planning commission, at the community workshop, one of the community residents asked, what are we doing to address the changing demographics and the changing needs of the for instance, the aging population in the community. So we will look at those factors to see if there are any unique needs that fit our local situation. Spanish language. Does that need to be addressed a little bit more to make sure that segments of the population are more included in some of the city activities, events, discussions? So yes, we will be looking at that.
Thank you. And I wanted to comment. First of all, the presentation was very, very comprehensive. I really appreciated the numbers. I was busy scribbling because it just, the 1,025 acres and 10 designations and the breakdown. I think it's really funny how 5-10 years ago, everybody wanted a Trader Joe's in their town, and with your Survey Monkey, everybody wants more recreation and community space. And I always thought that Buellton, that we were already a little bit above and beyond other communities for our open space. But it was really interesting to hear that this is what the community wants to see even more of. So thank you very much. I will turn it back. Are we taking our break now, or do you want to continue on to the circulation? How do you want to handle this?
We can certainly take a break now, because as we go into the circulation presentation, again, that's it's an own discrete segment, and probably be better not to break it up. So we can take just a short 5-minute break and then come back and go on to the circulation portion, if that is.
Does that work for everybody?
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Okay, 5 minutes.
All righty.
Thank you.
So at 7:06, we'll be back.
You got it. this one is Rose, Scott, and Joel.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Absolutely.
And you guys can all still see the presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Let's see. So the circulation element update. So the circulation element, just a general background, provides our city's planning process and how we improve roads, bike paths, sidewalks, and transit. It's all of our transportation network. And it provides the goals of the city with respect to transportation, both locally and regionally. And similar to what Andrea mentioned and why we need to provide this update, the last time this was reviewed for the circulation element was in 2006-ish, and I believe that update was just a general cleanup version, so we haven't had a comprehensive update till since many years before that. So it's due. You know, since the 2006, we've had new developments come in. We've had new destinations, different things going on land use-wise within the city. We have industrial areas now turned into tasting rooms and restaurants. We have new parks, and also we have several new studies that impact the circulation portion for the city. We had the vision plan from 2012. We have the bicycle and pedestrian master plan that was also in 2012. And then more recently, we had the San Ynez Valley Bicycle Master Plan, which included the city of Buellton, that was adopted in 2019. The San Ynez Valley Traffic Circulation and Safety Study, which was completed earlier this year. Regionally, there's the SBCAG 2040 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, and also new regulations that we need to incorporate into our circulation element. And specifically, those are AB 1385, which is the Complete Streets Act, and SB 743, which is regarding to vehicle miles traveled. It's a new way for us to equate how we monitor our streets, and it's related to SB 35, which essentially is the greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements. Next slide. So just going over, our existing transportation network includes all of our roads, which have different variations and portions, which are residential. We have commercial and industrial roads, our collectors, arterials, which is our larger streets such as McMurray and Avenue of Flags, and of course we are lucky to have both a highway, State Route 246, and a freeway that bisect the town. It includes all of our bicycle networks. So our bike lanes that we do have installed are also on 246, Avenue of Flags and McMurray Road. And on 2nd Street and Shadow Mountain Drive, we've incorporated Sharrows, which is little bicycle pavement markings you see on the roads. Our pedestrian part is all of our sidewalks throughout the city. It includes the trails, both ones that have been built or planned to be built as part of developments and improvements, and easements that we're acquiring to build larger trail facilities. And we also need to make sure that all of this has the appropriate ADA access. And of course, lastly, we don't want to leave out the transit. We have different facilities that we work through the city. The city doesn't operate any transit services, but we are served by the San Ynez Valley Transit, which includes the Dial-A-Ride, the Wine Country Express, the Breeze 200, Clean Air Express, and Amtrak. Next slide. So I listed some documents that we are looking at to incorporate in the circulation update that impact our transportation network. So specifically, the existing general plan circulation element already has goals and programs and policies that affect these, but the Vision Plan 2012 has goals and objectives as well. The Avenue of Flags specific plan that was adopted in 2017 has specific guidance and improvements called out, and the San Ynez Valley Traffic Circulation and Safety Study from 2020. We do need to update our bicycle and pedestrian portion of the circulation element, including the 2012 Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan and the San Ynez Bicycle Master Plan, and also the transit. There was a North County Regional Transit Plan that was completed in 2016 through SBCAG, and that coordinates all of the services throughout North County and also crossing into South County to make sure all the communities are served as needed. And so these documents, particularly the local documents such as the vision plan and the Avenue Flag specific plan, they provide a much more detailed impact for the circulation element that would discuss things such as parking, truck and RV accommodation, and other specific transportation elements, such as areas that we wanted multi-way stop signs, traffic calming, number of traffic lanes, such as on Avenue Flags, etc. So these are all these documents that we need to look at and incorporate as far as this update. So next slide. So I just wanted to briefly provide some graphics. This one just shows our existing bicycle pathways throughout town. And we are starting to incorporate them. We're able to, fortunately, work with Caltrans, getting the Class 1 Class 2 bike lane on Highway 246, and you'll see in green we have the Sharrows as well. Next slide. And then this just provides an overview for you as far as the different transit services that we have throughout town, and their different routes throughout the city. There's many stops, different locations. The main, most frequently used transit service throughout the city is the San Ynez Valley Transit. That one pretty much circles throughout town and has different designated spots, and all those times are coordinated with the other services. So at the different stops, you can transfer from one to the other if you're moving throughout town, or you need to hop on to get in Clean Air Express to go south, or the Breeze to go back north, or etc. Next slide. So what we are doing as far as this portion or this phase where we're at in the circulation element update is reviewing the existing conditions and providing an assessment of what we have currently. Normally, we would do new traffic counts at our critical intersections. Unfortunately, just because timing of this study, we had the COVID pandemic, we weren't able to actually do new counts. So what we've been working with the consultant is collecting all of the project traffic data counts that we have, any available counts from other sources, from Caltrans and SBCAG reports, any other traffic safety studies, development traffic studies, et cetera, to try to pull all of that data together as most recent as possible. We're also reviewing accident history. We're evaluating the type of the accident that was that had occurred and the causes in the actual accident reports. We're reviewing the intersections and road segments for level of service, a performance evaluation, and we'll get into later. Right now we're looking at level of service is what's commonly viewed as far as how well the streets are performing, but we're looking at different aspects because we have to go into the VMTs in that for reviewing of future documents. And I mentioned we are reviewing a few of the critical intersections. So next slide. So the next few graphics kind of shows you a snapshot of the different existing conditions that's been reviewed. This one is the existing daily roadway segment traffic volumes. It gives you details as well as far as not just the total volumes for the intersection, but which direction that the vehicles are turning. Next slide. It's another one where we're evaluating our pedestrian or bicycle-involved collisions. And if I can zoom my screen on here, you'll see areas with the dots denote specific locations for those occurrences. Next slide. Next one is the vehicle-only collisions, and I believe, Joe, if you correct me if I'm wrong, but these are vehicle-with-vehicle-only collisions. And then,
that's correct.
Great. And then you'll see by the intensity of the color, the dark green is where there's been occurrences, but the less frequent, but the brighter it gets through yellow and towards red is where there is a high occurrence of those vehicle-vehicle accidents. The next screen is, as Kara mentioned earlier, through the community survey, there's several, through the SurveyMonkey portions, a few questions that related to the circulation element. And the first one was, what issues most affect you in regards to transportation and circulation in Buellton? So with 129 responses, lo and behold, Highway 246 is on the top of the list in this word cloud. So 92 respondents of the community mentioned Highway 246 in their comments as far as what most affects them. Let me see. And you'll see some of the other words in the background of the word cloud, the issues in which that they perceive as far as that they're concerned about, because we asked them to identify the streets and intersections, or with a little explanation as far as what specifically were their concerns. And you'll see both west end of Highway 246 and the east end of Highway 246 were the next two largest portions of mention of the location. Speed issues were one, more crosswalk, they want traffic lights, there's just traffic in general, and difficulty with access and entering and exiting shopping centers. So these are a lot of the things that we want to consider and take a look at as far as safety and issues and concerns that's been raised with the survey. The next slide. So this addresses the next couple of questions that they had. While the previous questions asked for overall transportation circulation issues in the city, these questions focus specifically on Highway 246. And first, this community was asked whether the survey takers believe they were if there were segments of Highway 246 that could be improved, and if so, to try to specify which segments. And then secondly, they were asked if there were any specific issues and concerns regarding 246, and give a little bit more specific information on that. So yes, of course, there is a lot of positive answers as far as areas and segments on 246 they would like to see improved or modified. And there were issues with it. And if you go to the next slide, we have our next word cloud. And generally, the most focused answers were related to west end of Highway 246 at 36%. And their concerns were speeding cars. They want speed to just drop, lower the speed limit. They'd like a stoplight at Sycamore, and just safer crosswalks, stoplights, and just safer areas for pedestrian and bicycles to be able to traverse that area. And that's definitely seen and heard by us as we're moving forward with evaluations. So with that, that is the existing conditions portion of this. Next slide, Claire. And we'll move into the goals and visions that we'd like to see with the circulation element. I think next slide. There was at some point we'll be circulating a copy of the city's existing circulation element, because that lists out 3 specific goals that the city wants to meet as far as in the existing circulation element. We want to make sure we establish a safe and balanced and efficient circulation and pedestrian system that serves all segments of the community and preserves the city's small character and quality of life, and plans for anticipated growth. Number 2, to encourage the use of alternate forms of transportation other than the automobile. And 3, to foster the revitalization of Avenue of Flags. You know, like this really did work in conjunction with the original land use element goals as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott to go over a little bit more about the goals and vision.
Thank you, Rose. The goals that Rose just read are from, as she mentioned, they're the existing circulation element goals adopted in, I think it was 2007 is when the adoption took place. You can see they're very basic. They're very straightforward. I want to move beyond that for just a second. If we go to the next slide, there's a graph that Kara mentioned or showed us earlier in the presentation here. And again, I just want to highlight the top 3 choices here: the recreational facilities, community spaces, and open space and parks. And those don't necessarily reflect any specific desire on the part of the community for circulation element changes. But to my mind, I look at these, the types of land uses which are being identified by the population as being desirable at this point. And I think it falls into line with a certain maturity that the city has reached, where the city is providing basic municipal services at a level that is sufficient for the public to start to want to see more amenities or more what I like to call quality of life issues or areas provided by the city. So they're not so much concerned about is the water going to be running tomorrow, or the streets potholed. They're more concerned with what is the city providing us as residents that make this a really nice place to live. And the recreational facilities, community spaces, and open space and parks are those things which a lot of communities would look at, particularly small communities would look at as being luxury items, things that are not necessarily basic items that the city would prioritize. So I want to just lay that down as the basis for what I'm going to propose to the council and the commission here as a possible vision moving forward with the city. So we can move to the next slide. The vision points here all revolve around improving the city's overall quality of life by connecting the city by increasing the number of quality travel choices, providing access, safe access to city destinations, particularly schools, commercial centers, and parks, increasing the rates of walking and bicycling, identifying opportunities to link neighborhoods and points of interest with pedestrian and bicycle-friendly infrastructure and transit, and by reducing vehicle emissions. If we don't go back in the slides, but if we were to go back to the current goal slide, I think you can find that all of these could easily be slid into one of the first 2 goals that the existing circulation element identifies. What I'd like to do here is kind of separate these out just a little bit into a little more granular format, so that we can start to identify, rather than broad categories, specific items that really focus on amenities or quality of life issues to our residents. Because we're not just talking about, is there a road leading from point A to point B, but now we're starting to look at, is that road from point A to point B the safest route that we can take to get there? Are there different ways to get there? Do I have to take a car on a road to get from point A to point B? And these are things that the residents will start to desire once those basic needs are met. So with that in mind, I just want to take a little bit of time and just point out a couple of issues to start the City Council and the Planning Commission thinking about what their vision would be or should be for the circulation element going forward. I will mention that the one goal that was not included in this discussion here that is an existing goal has to do with revitalization of the Avenue of Flags. And I'm going to mention that it's not included because if we go to the next slide, I'm going to include it. Here we go. So what we're looking for here is are some thoughts from the City Council and the Planning Commission as to how we develop or what kind of a vision we can develop for circulation and mobility within the city. We know, or at least I'm suggesting, that what we should be focusing on at this point are quality of life enhancements, but how should we focus the city's resources and efforts, and where should we? I think one of the primary areas that we see from both a land use and a circulation perspective is going to be on Avenue of Flags. As the City Council and the Commission are aware, the Avenue of Flags specific plan was adopted 2 or 3 years ago, I believe. It identifies a number of areas along the Avenue of Flags as appropriate for mixed use development, residential and retail. The retail focus and the residential inclusion within these areas tend to necessitate certain improvements and changes to the circulation system along Avenue of Flags. Those will tend to be things that are falling under the category of traffic calming improvements. We've seen the first of these go in already, which are the tabletop crosswalks that are attached to the median 2 development. But there are other improvements that are proposed as well. These include the 4-way stops at intersections. I believe they're identified at 2nd Street and at Damasa. And then there's also the issue of reducing the number of traffic lanes from the current 2 lanes in each direction down to a single lane in each direction along the Avenue of Flags. All of these things were done in response to a change from the status quo on Avenue of Flags to the desired shift to the mixed use residential and retail focus. The intent of or the need for retail is to have traffic slowed down so that people can stop and take advantage of the retail establishments. Traffic that moves too quickly tends to result in retail that gets bypassed because the public doesn't know it's there, or it's inconvenient to pull in and out of because traffic is moving too quickly. So slowing down the traffic through the use of the table crossings, through the use of the 4-way stops, through the reduction in the number of lanes is really an attempt at enhancing the ultimate success of retail development on the Avenue of Flags. With this in mind, what I'm hoping to get from the Commission and the City Council, either tonight or sometime in the near future, are your thoughts as to whether or not this mixed-use retail residential focus is still a desirable policy. It is an adopted specific plan within the city, and so staff is moving forward as if this is the way to move forward. But more importantly, even if we don't change the specific plan, which is a long and involved process that I would not recommend, are we ready to move forward with the with some of these traffic calming measures that are on the table in front of us? We have the table crossings already installed. We will be revisiting those here in the near future, evaluating their function and how well they operate and how well the public adapts to them over the next couple of months. We have 4-way stops that I mentioned previously. Is the City Council and the Planning Commission, are you ready to see those be installed? Those may very well prove to be as effective or more effective even than the table crossings at slowing down the traffic. And then just ultimately that question of the single lane in each direction. So just some questions for you so that we can get some feedback and start to develop this vision moving forward for Avenue of Flags. The other area of focus, if I can go to the next slide, is the area of focus would be Highway 246. And of course, with Highway 246, as you've seen in the word cloud slides that were previously presented, the big focus here has to be safety. I mean, priority one, we need to look at ways to improve safety on Highway 246 from east to west. There's also the opportunity here, and Joel will get into this here in a little bit, to provide opportunities for a range of modes of transit and transportation along Highway 246 to enhance the ability for pedestrians to move east to west, cyclists, and of course the automobiles that are here. Some of the envisioned changes that we're looking at in the short term might include sidewalk connections on both sides of the 246, on East 246, all the way to Ballard Canyon Road. There is a noticeable lack of pedestrian mobility along that stretch, and I think the city might be well served in looking at accelerating improvements along that area. As I mentioned, Joel will be talking about here in a few minutes, some possibilities for restriping and other improvements on West 246. Again, increasing the safety as well as the utility of West Highway 246 for multiple modes of transit. And lastly, kind of what I'd like to refer to as my pie in the sky kind of concept here. I'd like to get the City Council and Planning Commission to think about and give me some comments possibly on contemplating some more dramatic improvements as part of the land use and circulation element EIR that's going to be prepared. And I don't have anything specific in mind. I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't have any technical expertise here, but I look at Highway 246, as I'm sure many of you have, and see that this road is just simply too wide. There are too many lanes of traffic. It is too far a distance to expect pedestrians to cross, particularly at locations which are not fully signalized. And that there may be some things that would be able to help improve safety, decrease speeds, as well as enhance the community image for motorists driving through. And while it may not seem feasible right now, given our response from Caltrans in recent years, I think that we might see some traction down the road, and it would help if we had already taken the time to think way outside the box on this and do some initial environmental review and see what kind of impacts we can look at and expect as part of this, in the hopes that we might be able to talk Caltrans into it. If we start the process now and maintain this pressure, we may see some movement on their part in the future. So these are the kinds of comments I'd really like to see from the Commission and the Council tonight, as well as any other comments that you may have regarding the long-term vision of the circulation system here within the city. And with that, I will conclude. And I believe Joel is our next presenter this evening.
We can probably.
This isn't my slide yet.
Right.
No.
We can move forward here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. This is mine. Well, thanks. I'm going to give a brief overview of the complete streets concept that's come up a few times in the conversation tonight. And complete streets is essentially finding a way to get a better use out of your infrastructure in the city to really create a healthier and more livable community and make it easier to cross the street, to walk, ride a bike, cross the street, and just something that addresses the mobility needs of everyone at any age, at any ability, for any type of trip, whether they're going shopping, whether they're going to school, whether they're out for recreation, any type of mobility. And complete streets essentially makes Buellton a better place to live. And there's lots of different ways to do this. And we have what we call a toolkit. So Claire, next slide, please. And please go, next slide. So with Complete Streets toolkits, there's many different tools in our bag of improvements that we can employ on Highway 246, for example, or Avenue of the Flags, or any other street in the city that creates a different kind of mobility environment. And what I'm going to show you in the next series of slides are some of the types of tools we've employed in other communities in Southern California. Not all of them fit Buellton, but it's just to give a sense of what can you do on a street to change the mobility environment, to make it a safer, more livable type of street. So this first slide here in front of you shows some of the types of pedestrian improvements that could be employed. And I won't go through all of them, but on the top row, for example, we have something called intersection tightening, where you can change the radius of the curbs at an intersection that slows cars down as they turn from, say, Highway 246 onto a local street. It makes the crossing distance a little shorter, so it helps to create a better and safer pedestrian environment. You can add street lights and pedestrian scale lighting that makes it a more walkable environment, increases and enhances visibility and safety for people as they walk. There's other tools such as sidewalk widening, and we've talked about, or it's been presented about the width of Highway 246. It's a 4-lane high-speed arterial, and maybe by reducing the number of lanes and putting wider sidewalks, it would invite people to walk and encourage more businesses to be on Highway 246 and change the environment there. There's also signage and wayfinding or landscaping enhancements that just increase the walkability, increase the attractiveness of the street, and make it a more desirable place to walk and bike. Next slide, please. There are also street crossing improvements, and those take many different shapes. There are embedded crosswalk lights that you may have seen in other communities, and when someone wishes to cross the street, there are flashing lights that let motorists know someone's in the crosswalk. That's the image in the top left. There are signalized crossing improvements such as hawk signals, and a hawk signal is a pedestrian crossing light that is dark until someone wants to cross the street, and they push a button and it goes from flashing yellow to red, so it lets motorists know that they have to slow down and then stop for someone in a crosswalk, and then moves to a flashing red mode to let motorists know stop and go. So that's just a different type of tool to help control the traffic environment, make it safer for walking. There are high visibility crosswalks and mid-block crosswalks, as shown on the second row, pedestrian refuge islands or other improvements, and then just more signage that can be implemented in different locations. Again, not all of these tools would apply to a street like Highway 246, but it just gives a sample of some of the tools that could be considered. They may be applicable to other streets such as Avenue of the Flags or other locations. So not everything here is just for Highway 246. Next slide, please. There are, of course, bicycle improvements, and you have a bike lane now on Highway 246 Class 2, and we'll talk about that in a little greater detail in a moment. But there's other amenities that can be added to increase the attractiveness of cycling on the highway, and maybe it's adding bike parking, or with signals, putting in bike signals to give priorities to cyclists, especially down by the 101 interchange where there's a higher volume of traffic. You saw on the heat map of accidents, higher incidence of car accidents at that location. So something that increases safety, not only for bikes, but for pedestrians. And then there are just different types of bike lane improvements that can be employed in the city, on the highway, and other locations. Next slide, please. And there's streetscape improvements, and streetscape is something that increases the attractiveness and livability of a street. If you're walking on on a 4-lane highway, adding landscaping and parklets and benches and maybe reclaiming some of the asphalt for parks and places to sit and making it greener, makes it more attractive, makes it a friendlier place to walk and to exist, makes it more attractive to businesses to want to be located there, and it helps create just a different environment. There's, of course, stormwater management that can go along with the planning to recapture that water, so it's a greener environment, not relying all year round on irrigation, and the addition of street furniture, benches and tables, places for people to sit and maybe just be outside and have a coffee or a lunch or a sandwich. And we talked earlier about street lighting, and certainly in locations where there are utility poles and other things, relocating them so it makes it a more pleasant environment. Next slide, please. And then, of course, there are other improvements for roadways, and maybe that's changing the use of parking, whether it's adding parking or taking parking out, or a combination of reducing lanes and maybe adding angled parking in locations, so all of the real estate is not just for through lanes, whether they're used or unused, the addition of landscape medians, or putting a street like Highway 246 on a road diet. And by road diet, we mean taking out a lane or two. It's a 4-lane arterial. It's the volumes at 13,000 cars a day, or half the capacity of the road. So there's a lot of unused roadway asphalt there that could be repurposed, and that's a conversation if the city is so inclined, the community is so inclined to have with Caltrans, and push for that greener, less auto-oriented environment if you're so inclined. There are other traffic calming type devices, speed feedback signs, and in some places, not necessarily for Highway 246, improvements or traffic calming improvements such as speed tables or speed cushions that can be employed on residential streets and other streets in the city, maybe 2nd Street, maybe Avenue and the Flags, or elsewhere. Again, these are just tools that are available to you. There are many others, traffic circles and other things that can be employed that change the dynamic and get people to change their driving habits. The idea behind traffic calming in complete streets is not only to slow traffic down in streets where we have high speeds, where we have too much traffic, it's diverting some of that traffic, but to change the behavior of motorists so they recognize when they're coming from the west that they've entered the city of Buellton, that they're on community streets, and we want them to slow down if they got off the 101 for food or gas. Hey, you're in the city now, so slow down and enjoy the city while you're here. This is our downtown. This is our community. So that's the idea of the many tools in this toolkit, and gonna next go into some examples of how you might employ some of these on Highway 246. Next slide, please.
Not that
Next
one?
slide, please.
Oh.
And so this is just an exercise on Highway 246. It's a what-if exercise. And what if you employed a complete streets environment on Highway 246? So we picked 4 locations in concert with staff to give you an idea of some changes you could make, and we kept it at the simplest level. No point in hitting it with a baseball bat yet. But if you go to the next slide, this first location is just west of the interchange of Highway 246 and 101. And in these series of slides, the top image shows you what the existing cross-section is. And the cross-section means from curb to curb, how are the lanes used, and what is the right-of-way available. And so we have an 80-foot wide roadway, and you can see it has a wide center two-way left turn median at 14 feet. It has 4 10-foot lanes, and it has narrow bike lanes on the street. Then on the bottom, we took the idea of, well, what if we narrowed the center two-way left turn median? What if we used some of that real estate to put in a protected bike lane, a cycle track on the road? So we would have a buffered bike lane that makes it more inviting for cyclists to ride. So it gives a more inviting environment to walk and to bike. Next slide, please. And here, just west of Avenue of the Flags, where we have a landscape median, and we continue with that theme of a protected bike lane along the avenue, again, with some narrower lanes to make better use of the real estate in this segment. And this would tie in nicely on the north side of Avenue and the Flags, where you have the bulb outs at the intersection. So it ties in nicely to a pedestrian crossing environment. And some of the tools I showed you earlier, such as bulb outs or curb extensions, would tie in nicely to a safer pedestrian crossing environment across the highway. And that would work in conjunction with even considering a road diet for Highway 246 and working with Caltrans to eliminate 2 of the traffic lanes and just have parklets or street parking or angled parking or other treatments with the bike lane. Next slide, please. And this is just to the west of La Lata, down by the schools, the elementary and the middle school, and putting in more signage to make it a safer environment to cross the street, and putting in continuing with the bike lane all the way on Highway 246. And I should point out that in these figures, we've used Street View from Google to give you a sense of what does the view look like today and in the future, so you can see the cross-section tied in to these concepts. And then if you go to the next and final slide, this is just to the west of Sycamore Drive. It gives you a sense of what the Highway 246 would look like with narrower lanes. It has a 20-foot wide center two-way left turn median today, and you could narrow that to 10 feet and put in protected bike lanes at this end of the city. The speed limit as you've come off of the highway to the west is 45 miles an hour, and it drops to just 35 as you approach Laletta. So it's understandable that concern of people speeding as they come into the city. And there's, that how do we get people to slow down as they come into the city, recognize they're not on a divided highway at this point. So these were just some simple concepts because we wanted to give a flavor of some of the things you could do. There are certainly more dramatic improvements, as I said, such as taking out 2 of the lanes if you were so inclined, putting in more medians, putting in bulb outs, putting in parklets, just changing the dynamic of the street. That really makes it a friendlier and more desirable street. It does cross the city. It's the heart of the city, along with Avenue of the Flags, and it's an important facility. So we want to give a flavor of what Complete Streets are about. It's going to be an important component of the circulation element update in the general plan. And I'll turn it back over to Rose.
Thank you, Joel. So that is a general overview of where we're at with the circulation element update. As Scott mentioned earlier, we want to reevaluate the goals as we're doing a comprehensive update for this particular portion of the general plan. And once the goals are established, want to review the policies. Similar to the land use element portion, there's existing policies and programs in the current the circulation element of general plan. We'll be going through those. A lot has been completed. Some have already been reviewed as infeasible. We've gone over some of these items. Some are no longer applicable. And then with the new input from the community, making it more current to the studies that's been recently completed and to the demographics and the community that we have today, we want to make this portion of the general plan relevant. So we'll be working on developing the goals and the policies and the programs that will ensue. This portion too will also need to address the social equity and environmental justice, similar to the land use element. So everything is going to be reviewed in that fashion altogether. So I won't go into more detail with that, as Andrea went into that pretty well earlier in the presentation. So with that, if the Planning Commission would like to start with comments, and then we'll move on to council member comments.
Hey, thank you, Rose. I will, again, thank you to staff and thank you to Joel. A lot of really good information here. I'm wondering if we need a workshop 2.5 to talk about the complete streets and the pressure on Caltrans. But at that, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Liggett for comments, questions.
Hi, thank you. That was a very nice presentation. Great. Good job at expressing the updates and expressing the vision for how you envision Buellton in the future in terms of circulation and transportation. I agree. I think a workshop that could be in person one day, where you could actually get people in the community there, put stickers on a map of where, some of their biggest concerns are. That could be really, really helpful. But who knows when that day will come. I am quite familiar with complete streets and the concepts behind that, and they're fantastic strategies. Any combination of them would really help minimize traffic, enhance the user's experience, and help revitalize portions of Buellton, particularly Avenue of the Flags. So I would love to see how we determine where those get implemented. Great examples on Highway 246. However, since that's not really our jurisdiction, where and how would we implement those in other places in Buellton, which are more feasible? So I would like to, maybe that just takes another workshop to identify those locations. Avenue of the Flags, crosswalks, I think, are definitely, when I walk down there, which I walk almost every day, the crosswalks to go from one side to the other really is the most noticeable factor that I see that's causing discomfort. Granted, there's not many establishments on, the east side or south side, so I don't cross too often, but there will be, particularly if the vision, comes to formation. So I'm glad that we're doing that with the new parking lot, but even just putting in crosswalks sooner than later, even I believe to the island, that's been an interesting idea. The hard thing for me to wrap my head around is Avenue of the Flags is quite dead right now. A lot of vacancies. It's not really very busy with people, but 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, when it reaches its capacity, we're going to have many, many more people. We're bringing in mixed use developments, which we say encourage walkability or alternative use of transportation, but there's not really any jobs here. So people are still going to be driving to and from their residences down there. Hopefully people come visit, so definitely they're going to be driving into town. So is one lane going to be enough, or is that going to be too burdensome on the traffic? I don't know. It's kind of that chicken or the egg, what comes first. But I really like the idea that we're thinking about that. And I do think sooner than later, some traffic calming strategies should be seriously considered and implemented in Avenue of the Flags and other locations as well. You just got me excited. This is what I personally, why I wanted to join the commission, is just seeing so much potential in the connectivity throughout the different neighborhoods. And I hope we can move forward and get something going. And these complete street strategies, I think is all we need. That could solve many of these issues. Overall, great presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your enthusiasm on this. I too am pretty excited about it. Again, I want to say thanks to staff and to Joel, and want to stress again, I really like the points that Scott brought up and how we can do things to improve the safety of the 246 and somehow pressure Caltrans, because let's see, I think I'm going on year number 17, I think, since I've lived in Buellton, and I walk almost daily, and I live on Sycamore Drive, and I walk down Valley Dairy and Riverview and try to cross the 246. But even like in the last year, it's gotten like everybody's driving faster all the time. I have to come back to Sycamore and use the flashing light to cross the walk. I walk with an elderly lady, and we've had some almost gotten run over a couple of times. And so anyway, so anything we can do to improve safety on the 246, pressure Caltrans. I think it's time, because it's, again, I've been around for a little while, and it always seems like when this issue comes up, Caltrans owns it and has the rights to it and does all the work, and they just won't do anything until we have X number of accidents. So that, and then again, I love the Complete Streets issue toolkit and all of those what if scenarios. Again, I don't know if you guys want to do a 2.5 workshop. Maybe we could socially distance in the council chambers. I don't know, because what Commissioner Liggett said, putting dots on a map, that'd be a really interesting way to do that and point out all the issues. Also, too, on Joel's presentation, he talked about on the 246, the calming and the reducing the traffic lanes. Some of those what if scenarios were bike lane ideas, and I'm still thinking, I think the bike lanes would be good, but even if we can, I don't know, maybe make the sidewalks bigger for pedestrians too, that might be another idea. So that's all the comments I have. So that's it for Planning Commission.
Thank you very much, Chair Hamill. Let's see, Councilmember King, your thoughts, questions?
Well, I want to apologize in advance for going into a rant.
Take a deep breath.
So, for starters, the tabletop calming, quote unquote, calming on 246, in my opinion, has been abysmal. That even speed bumps for emergency services people. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So law enforcement nationally has said these speed bumps have been very detrimental to law enforcement personnel and fire, because when you put these in a neighborhood, the emergency services, the ambulances, and I speak to this from a 25-year career in law enforcement, and specifically traffic, is that their response times to neighborhoods that have these is exceedingly increased by putting in speed bumps in neighborhoods. So let me digress a minute and talk about perception versus reality. So when I first went into the Monterey office out of the CHP Academy, there was a street, Carmel Valley Road. It was by a school. A bunch of parents, had all got up in arms about people speeding by their school, and they signed a petition. There was, probably 50 names on the petition about oh, people are speeding by the school, and our kids are all in danger. Oh my God, people are going to be killed. So we took that petition, put it up on the board in our CHP office.
Rose.
And then when we would write those parents a ticket, we'd go check their name off the list. Because when you stand on the side of the road and you look at a car going by versus you driving your own car, the perception, the reality is different. So you really have to look at facts versus perception, because perception is not always reality. So you really have to look at the facts of what kind of accident picture do you have? How many tickets are you writing? How many people are speeding in that particular area or zone? Those are the facts. Perception is different from facts. So now we're looking at these tabletop calming zones, so to speak, or narrowing it down to one lane, or looking at those particular factors, facts versus reality, or facts versus perception. I drove over that tabletop that's out there in Median 2, and I think that's abysmal. I think it needs to be taken out, honestly. If you imagine someone trying to go to a fire truck or an ambulance going to an emergency call, they're going to have to slow down to 2 or 3 miles an hour to get over that. I don't think it's really addressing the issue or the problem. Many times I'll look at something that was down when I was working in Santa Barbara. People were complaining about Cathedral Oaks. Oh, they're all speeding through here. So you have to do a traffic survey to determine whether you're going to reduce the speed of that particular location. Well, they did a survey and they found out that the average speed actually was lower than what was posted, and they increased the speed. So the old saying, be careful what you wish for.
Okay.
So I think if we're going to go forward with looking at, traffic circulation and changing it from 2 lanes to 1, and I'll digress here again for a second, is that I think I was very clear and specific if we were going to do anything on Avenue of Flags, that there was to be 2 lanes in each direction, and I was promised that there was going to be 2 lanes in each direction. Well, if you look out in front of Heritage, there is absolutely no way that you can put 2 lanes out in front of Heritage, because they have moved that curb line out far enough where the cars are parked. There's no way we can make 2 lanes in each direction. I don't really think that there is an issue with people racing up and down Avenue of Flags, and that only the facts can determine whether you should put traffic calming or traffic lights or stop signs or whatever in that particular area. That's what we ought to focus on, is facts, not perception.
Okay.
As far as 246 goes, you and I know, and the rest of the council know, and Planning Commission know, that 246 is very difficult for us to do anything on there because that is controlled by Caltrans.
Okay. Anything else?
Not at this particular time.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Mercado, I know Councilman Sanchez I believe he's getting ready to take flight. So any questions or comments from you?
No questions, but hopefully if we do have another workshop, there's a couple things depending on what direction we're going, I'd have a question. But I wanted to thank staff and Joel. A lot of information here, especially on the complete streetlights. A good thanks to Scott for his vision on getting us to implement some of this stuff sooner than later. I agree a lot. Some of the things what Dave was said on perception and reality. I think hopefully we can do something with crossing street improvements at the school with more lights. My wife and I, we walk. We're on the other side of town. We're on the Thumbelina side. So we do have not only 246, but if we wanted to cross over, we have to cross over 101 at Damasa to get to the other side. There is a crosswalk there at the new parking lot, so that helps. It's not flashing, but there is a crosswalk there. Daytime is fine. Nighttime, you would have some concerns. But it gives us some options to look at all these things as we do this element update, and gives us some good options, I think. So I'm looking forward to having another workshop.
Thank you. I just had a couple myself. First of all, I'd really like staff to share the monkey survey with Caltrans and SBCAG. I know we've been working, ever since Dave and I got on council, we've been working on 246 safety, and they're actually talking about a road diet. And I know Caltrans believes in complete streets, so maybe our umpteenth time sitting down with them. I know SBCAG said that they were willing to sit down in November and go over some other ideas. So maybe the time is right for that. I really appreciated, Joel, what you came up with, your what ifs. It's gotten more difficult because the speed limit out on 246 used to be 55 coming into town, that went to 45 and then 35. And because it's a 2-lane highway, Caltrans changed that to 65. So now we go from 65 to 45 to 35. And cars don't like when they're hitting 65 and they're close to 101. They don't like to slow down. So yeah, that one hurts because it's hard when you don't have control over the street, and the city cannot afford to take over Highway 246. I like the idea of sidewalks on 246 to Ballard Canyon. I'm wondering if we could somehow incorporate, I don't know if they've ever even thought about it, sidewalks in Thumbelina. There are no sidewalks in that residential area, so when you're walking, the streets are really wide, which is really nice, but I don't know if that's something that you've had an issue with, Art, or not. There are no sidewalks in there.
There is no sidewalks.
You have sidewalks?
There are no sidewalks in Thumbelina.
No, didn't think so, yeah. And I think that's the only residential area that does not have sidewalks in our community. And for Avenue of Flags, I love the vision moving forward. I do like the idea. I'm going to go against Councilman King. I know that it's a big surprise. I thought after much discussion, we had agreed on the single lane in each direction. They had talked about 2-lane on one side and nothing on the other side, and I thought we had all pretty much agreed on the single lane in each direction. And I like the idea of the 4-way stops. I think with development coming, we may not need it right now at this moment, but with development coming, I do think that it's nice to just start to slow traffic down coming off of Highway 101. So I'd like to see some calming. I don't know if the table is the crosswalk table is the way to go. I think it was a big shock to all of us. It's the first one in town. And the first time I went over it, I was surprised. The second and third time, not so much. But I don't know that there's a need to do that tomorrow. I do think it's coming, though. And again, I think our city manager was correct with the Survey Monkeys and the vision. People in our town, I think, are pretty happy with what we have, what we provide to them as services. I think that the quality of life, that's why most of us are here in Buellton, that's really important to us. So all for that. The presentation was wonderful. I did have one, unless Claire, we've gotten more in. I keep checking, I haven't seen any. I did get one public comment from an Ashley Jenkins. Was there any other ones, Claire?
That is the only one so far.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and read that. Hello, council members and commission members. My name is Ashley Jenkins, and I am the founder of the Santa Ynez Valley Children's Museum, a nonprofit designed to bring an outdoor children's museum here to our valley. The city of Buellton has positioned itself as a hub for both locals and visitors. With shops, family-friendly hotels, and delicious restaurants, there is a lot to draw people to Buellton. Unfortunately, family-friendly amenities are lacking. While the city has literally knocked it out of the park with the wonderful Riverview Park and Santa Ynez Botanic Gardens, residents need more things to do here in town. Our Children's Museum will provide a place where children can touch and build and play and create in a carefully curated, secure environment. Especially in these days of socially distant remote learning, families are desperate for activities where their children can get away from screens and exercise both their muscles and imagination. Currently, families with children have to drive 45 minutes to an hour and a half to get to activities. This takes income away from our city and makes Buellton a less attractive place for families to settle long-term. Starting a children's museum here in Buellton will be a big step in the right direction. We look forward to partnering with you in providing this timely service to our community. Regards, Ashley Jenkins, Executive Director, Santa Ynez Valley Children's Museum. Okay, no other public comments, so I'll close that up. Irma, it looks like you get to do the recap and timeline for us.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Sierra. This is just very quick here, just kind of pulling it all back together. So we have just finished phase one of the general plan update effort. Basically, we have collected existing conditions, identified issues, looked at potential outcomes. We're looking at the vision in some cases. And now that we have collected the data and heard comments from the community as well as the Planning Commission and the City Council, we will enter the next phase, and that would be actually starting to prepare the reports. And by the reports, I mean the actual updates to the elements, the land use element and the circulation element. And that will take us to the next phase. And when we have the draft reports available, it was our intention to schedule additional workshops and hearings, perhaps, definitely community meetings where we can get input from the community, the public, as well as the Planning Commission and the City Council again. But we did hear the council mention, well, not just the council, but Planning Commission members mention about potentially another workshop just focused on complete streets. So this is a possibility. I don't know how that would look in our timeline, but perhaps we can start the process. Staff and our consultants will talk about how we could fit something like that in as we are preparing the element updates, especially the circulation updates. And I don't know if we'll be able to do something like that physically in person, but it's possible. So we can discuss that and see where we are with that. But as far as wrapping up this particular workshop, we are anticipating that there will be community members watching, and if any of those members watching in the community or community members who heard about this and couldn't watch, if they have additional comments that they would like to submit, post workshop, that they can get those to us by October 30th, and we will incorporate those into this particular effort. And it is our intent to collect all of the results from this community survey, all the comments that came from the public, from the Planning Commission and the City Council, and prepare a summary report that will be made available so that, not only the decision makers, but also the community can have access to it and review all the data. So we are, looking forward to doing that in the next, probably after October 30th when we have everything in. And we will be going forward with the effort of starting to prepare the draft documents throughout the winter. So with that, we really just have closing comments. Chair Hamill and Mayor Sierra, do you have any closing comments to make? And then we can move towards adjourning the meeting.
My only closing comment is, again, to thank everyone who presented and all of the presentations, the detail in all of the presentations. And thank you to my fellow Commissioner Liggett who attended, and thank you to the other attendees. I think this was a great workshop.
Thank you. I would agree with you. It was very thorough. The information was important to get. It gives us a lot of things to start thinking about. We may not agree on where the thought process goes, but everything has been presented to us and gives us the time to put some thought into it and get back to you by October 30th. I really appreciate you setting this up so that the Planning Commission and City Council could work together. I think that's only happened once or twice since I've been on council, and it's really nice to hear directly from the commissioners. And I'm really proud of our team, even John Sanchez on his way to LAX for hanging in there, and Dave and Art. I truly appreciate you guys giving up your Wednesday night when you know you've got a long Thursday night. I truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you very much for the information. I too would be interested in a complete streets, maybe little mini seminar. I know the city of Santa Barbara is not doing anything without thinking through the complete street. Their city council voted that none of their upcoming projects would be done without reviewing it through complete street thinking. So I'd be very curious to hear a little bit more about it as well. And thank you all very, very much. I guess at this point, Claire, I adjourn the meeting now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All righty. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you to everybody tonight. Have a good one.
Great. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Right.